Very good afternoon to one and all. I welcome all the freshly passed out orthopedic surgeons for whom this initiative is primarily intended. We have tried to get the best possible guidance for you all. When I started off more than 3 decades back, our options were quite limited, and now they have increased quite a lot, which makes choice that much more difficult. Now, while making a choice, you should first be able to assess your own capabilities. It is not somebody telling you that you do this or do that. One is the best possible judge of his own capabilities, and I hope all of you are benefited by this initiative. We are very thankful to our patrons, Professor Dr. Vishwanath Karad and Dr. Suresh Gaisas, and also our executive directors, Dr. Virendra Gaisas and Dr. Suchitra Nagre Madam, for blessing this initiative. Now I hand over the mic to Dr. Suchitra Nagri Madam for her introductory remarks.
Very good afternoon to all the orthopedic young doctors of Pune and around. On behalf of management of Mimar Medical College, I welcome all the participants for today's webinar. I welcome Dr. Darshan Sonavane from Bharati Vidyapit, Dr. Tushar Devre from Jupiter. Tushar was with us for a while, I think 2 years back, and Dr. Bhaskar from Columbia Asia, Dr. Shirish from DMH, and Dr. Sampath Patil from Noble Hospital. I congratulate the Department of Orthopedic for taking up this initiative, because when we are thinking of our own careers, I feel that we always are having few dilemmas in our minds, that what is right and what is wrong for me, and whatever I'm choosing, will I reach to the destination which I am thinking of, or I have dreamt of, if I may say. So I think that this is very good startup which has taken up by Department of Orthopedic, wherein all you stalwarts from your own fields will be participating, and there will be consecutive few more sessions about different topics related to orthopedic. So I welcome all of you. Regarding orthopedics, I will not speak much, but I think we are having great people in Pune who have proven themselves, like Dr. Sancheti sir is there, or Dr. Wakankar sir in joint replacement, and in spine surgeon there are big names like Dr. Deshmukh and all. So I think without taking much time of all of you, I wish you all the best, and I welcome all the participants for this workshop which has been conducted, the webinar, online webinar. I think COVID had taught us that no need to go physically everywhere. Wherever you need sharing of knowledge, it is best possible even without meeting. And even now the online consultation and everything is getting approved by all the authorities. So this is a very nice startup by Department of Orthopedic. Wish you all the best, and once again I welcome you everyone. Thank you.
A very good afternoon to all of you. So for starting the first session, we have with us Dr. Darshan Sonavane. Dr. Darshan Sonavane sir has completed his MBBS from BJ Medical College in the year of 2006. He then went on to complete his post-graduation in the year 2010 from Sancheti Hospital in Pune, and also achieved the dual degree of DNB in orthopedics in 2011. He has been since then working in Kashibai Navle as a lecturer for till the year 2015. He has completed numerous fellowships, especially one under Dr. Hemant Wakankar sir in 2014 for joint replacement, and one in USA for the foot and ankle surgery at the University of Alabama. He is currently working as an associate professor in Bharati Vidyapit Medical College, Pune. He is going to start. He is going to talk today about the fascinating and interesting subject of traumatology.
First of all, very good afternoon to everyone, and I would like to thank the organizing team for inviting me for this particular session. I would like to thank all the patrons, Karat sir, Nagre madam, Gaisas sir, especially Kamath sir, who has been an examiner at Bharati Hospital for quite some time in our PG examinations. So without wasting much time, I would just start with the session. So the topic that has been given to me to speak on today's future of a trauma surgeon. So just like to go about it in a stepwise manner. Firstly, I would like to congratulate each and every individual of you who has entered the field of orthopedics either recently or has just completed their orthopedics degree. Trust me, I mean, at least it's my own belief that you are probably the cream of even the medical faculty. So congratulations on that. And without first I'll just a basic brief history of orthopedics. So the term orthopedics as such was coined by Professor Nicholas Andre in way back in 1741, where he derived this from two words, basically orthos and pedos. Orthos, which means straight and free from deformity, and pedos, that is a child. So over a period of time, this particular branch has evolved and has encompassed a huge variety of problems that encompass or that are presented to us with the patients. So this is usually the career path that one goes through. So first you take admission into the branch of orthopedics, whether that is MS, DNB, or maybe even diploma in orthopedics. Later on, going on to do a DNB. After that, you pass the exams, become an orthopedic surgeon, and then you're stuck in a dilemma. Now, what to do? Now, whether I should do this specialty, that specialty, or continue just doing trauma. So, just to just highlight these things. So in the future, so what are we basically looking at? So in the future, so we are looking at what specialization one wants to do, which out of those particular specializations has better prospects in terms of getting a good job at a corporate hospital or doing it in a private practice. Why you want to do that particular specialty? One particular individual might like replacement surgeries, another might like spine surgeries. So there comes a preference or an individual choice. And then once you've decided that, how to proceed into the future. So trauma surgery. Sorry. So basically, in my personal opinion, I think trauma surgery is an essential prerequisite should be doing trauma surgery. Now, why this is important is because it teaches you a good tissue handling, good skills doing surgery, meticulous dissections, teaches you anatomy of the various regions that are involved, and it provides you with the thinking ability of how to make particular decisions in a given situation. And trust me, if you look at the origins of any specialty in orthopedics, subspecialty, almost everything will start and eventually will deal with some form of trauma. So let it be any particular subspecialty in orthopedics. Let it be scopy, spine, arthroplasty, foot and ankle, pediatrics, or oncology. So just to highlight these things, just put up a few pictures. So if you look at internal derangement of the knees, all internal derangement of the knees, whether it is an ACL avulsion fracture or intrasubstantial tear of the ACL, it basically involves initial trauma. If it's PCL, so whether you want to do a fixation by using arthroscopic means, that is specialization after arthroscopy, or you want to do something like a PCL fixation by an open reduction means. So that, but still, basically it is trauma. If you look at shoulder also, the most common surgery that is done in shoulder is Bankhart's lesion repair, arthroscopic Bankhart's repair for recurrent shoulder dislocations. And why does this shoulder dislocate? Is because of an initial traumatic episode. So as I was saying, so we'll go to the next specialty. So as I said about arthroscopy, there are a lot of trauma. I mean, most of the conditions will involve an antecedent trauma. Similarly, in the spine, it can be something as innocuous as a compression fracture in elderly to a devastating thoracolumbar fracture dislocation, post-traumatic, of course, in a young individual, leading to paraplegia or elsewhere. Then if you come to the next specialty, so-called arthroplasty, so as seen in these x-rays, whatever. So the most common, or rather one of the commonest procedures is doing a bipolar hemiarthroplasty for intracapsular neck femoral fractures. Of course, in young individuals, you do fixation. In the elderly, you go for a replacement surgery. Foot and ankle, I would say, and I mean, having done a fellowship in foot and ankle surgery, absolutely, I will really first of all thank Sampan Dubre Patil sir for giving me an opportunity to do that fellowship. But having practiced almost 5 years now after completing my fellowship, I say that most of my foot and ankle practice is based on trauma. Very little elective work that really comes up in foot and ankle surgery. So even in foot and ankle surgery, the bulk of the treatment that is provided by me in foot and ankle subspecialty is also trauma. Of course, pediatric orthopedics, I'm sure everyone will agree that the number of, say, Perthes disease or congenital dislocations of hip that you would have seen being operated is very, very less as compared to something like this, a supracondylar fracture of the humerus. So even in pediatric orthopedics, probably trauma is a more common thing. And lastly, orthopedics oncology. So even in this, especially in our country, most of the patients will come very late. They'll not come very early, and many of them will present with something like this, a pathological fracture following a trauma. So eventually, that is also something related to trauma. So as we saw, almost any branch or subspecialty that you wish to undertake after doing your, after achieving your degree. Yes, so after doing after doing completing a basic degree, any specialty will involve some amount of trauma, whichever, no matter which subspecialty you wish to undertake. So if you do want to further specialize in trauma, are there any options? Yes, so recently, rather in Jan 2016, AIIMS at Delhi has started with MCH in trauma surgery. It's a 3 years course. I'm not sure many orthopedic surgeons do undertake this, but it is open for both after specialization in general surgery and orthopedic surgery. So if anyone wishes to do undertake this, yes, it is one option. And of course, abroad. So abroad, MCH orthopedics is mainly in trauma that is available in UK, and their FRCS is also called as FRCS trauma and ortho, not just FRCS ortho. So that just basically highlights the importance of trauma surgery and orthopedics. Now coming to today's age, what all of us have gone through in the recent past 6-7 months is coronavirus or COVID-19 infection. So, no one really knows this, but overall the prognosis of the world is uncertain. But what it has done is it has impacted elective surgeries by a huge amount. So then you can just go around and ask anyone. I would like to, in fact, ask my contemporaries also who are going to speak after me. I'm sure the number of elective surgeries that they were doing, so whether it was arthroscopic ACL reconstruction or it was a total knee replacement or a total hip replacement, the number of surgeries they were doing before COVID and right now, there's going to be a drastic difference. Whereas I'm sure all of them, I've worked with most of them, with Dumre Patil sir, with Tushar Devre, he was a co-lecturer with me at Navle. Agashe sir, he was there he's still there at Sahyadri Hospital. Yeah, so all of them are, and Shirish Pathak sir also, all of them are accomplished trauma surgeons. Trust me on that. And I'm sure probably in the past 6-7 months, they've done more emergency or trauma surgeries as compared to the elective specialization surgeries. As far as the elective surgery, something like a total knee replacement is done, there is a huge psychological impact that has been created due to COVID on all these elderly patients. Many of them are now rethinking whether they really want to undergo a replacement surgery, at least in the near future. And of course, there are financial implications. So many of these elective surgeries, patients and or their relatives will think whether we do want to spend additional on an elective or an optional surgery. Whereas if it's something like a fracture, if someone comes with a fractured tibia or a fractured femur, they are not going to think twice before actually getting that surgery done, because they know without that they are not going to be able to walk. So in my opinion, future of trauma surgeon or trauma surgery is absolutely very bright. The most important advantage of this is you don't require any fellowship really. I mean, your basic degree qualifies you to be a trauma surgeon. So whether you've done MS or DNB, as soon as you achieve that degree, you're basically a specialist. You don't require any fellowship at all, and you can do any trauma surgery as per your experience. It has a very wide scope, so it can range from as minor cases, minor things like a green stick fracture or a torus fracture in children, to devastating, mutilating, grade 3C compound fractures or crush injuries of the lower extremities. So there's a huge variety, and the amount of treatments that can be done can be ranged from a simple splint application right up to external fixators or as complex as Elizarov fixator applications. And you have to be rest assured that no matter what comes, I mean, even if COVID is there, does not there, trauma cases are always going to be there. There is a huge variety of the cases, as I said. It poses unique challenges. It keeps your brain running. It keeps your brain functioning, active all the time. And with absolute due respect, I mean, to everyone else, I myself also have done an arthroplasty fellowship. But if you compare, I'm sure most may agree with this, that if you just take a simple total knee replacement, I mean, a standard total knee replacement patient, more or less it is instrument based. So you take a system of Zimmer or Smith and Nephew, whatever, you require their jig to take that proper cut. So there's not much use of your brain. You put that jig, you take the cut, and you put the prosthesis. Whereas if you take even a simple distal radius fracture, putting that, I mean, first achieving a close reduction and then passing those K wires, each individual case is going to be technically different. So it poses unique challenges and it keeps your brain active, in my personal opinion. Also, you get a big orthopedic feel when you're doing trauma surgery. So especially when you're dealing with something like a non-union of a long bone, taking that big approach, exposing both ends of the non-union side, cutting off the periosteum, banana peeling it, and holding the two ends in your hands with brute force, reaming it, that's going to give you an orthopedics feel. And in the future wise, inventory infrastructure that is required for doing a trauma surgery is much less. I mean, you don't really require a laminar flow OT to do a trauma surgery. You can do it in a normal OT. You don't require to buy expensive arthroscopy equipments to do trauma surgery. A basic hand drill, I mean, even a Manman drill is more than, and a CM, of course, is sufficient to do most of your trauma surgeries. So in my opinion, it's a very bright future for trauma surgeons, whether you're practicing in the periphery, a remote periphery, or whether you're practicing in a metro. So there's a huge, huge scope for doing trauma surgery. So I'll just come to it again. So what we saw earlier, future. So what specialization? So in my opinion, it is always trauma first. So consider trauma to be a stepping stone for doing any further specialization. So as I discussed before regarding what are the benefits or importances of doing trauma surgery, it is absolutely mandatory to do trauma first. Hone your skills in trauma, dissection of the tissues, handling of the soft tissues and the bone, and then go on and specialize. I'm not saying don't specialize in anything, but even if you become a very good specialist in any particular field, make sure you're good in trauma first. I mean, some Thomas have mentioned about Dr. Sancheti sir, and since I've passed out from Sancheti, senior Sancheti sir was an excellent trauma surgeon. From what I mean, he stopped operating by the time I joined, but I mean trauma surgeries. But he was an excellent trauma surgeon. Same goes with all the senior surgeons who are there, and even in today's age, all those senior people that I have worked with, they are excellent trauma surgeons. Absolutely, of course, they've done specialization, but always remember that you have to be a good trauma surgeon first. So which specialization has better prospects? Yes, that is debatable, and I would say all specializations have a good prospect, but you must remember that trauma absolutely has no end. People are going to keep on getting fractures, and people are going to require treatment for trauma. Why it is important? Because trauma is present everywhere. And how do you proceed? Is first you master your trauma skills, or it will traumatize you. That would be my closing statement. Now, if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Right.
Kula Swapnil sir.
Master. Very good lecture, and you have given a very insight of the trauma, which is the bread and butter of every orthopedic surgeon. Very well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, you cannot think. I mean, especially in today's COVID era,
Yes.
I'm sure most people would, if whatever cases they are operating, 90% would be trauma.
And our fixation should aim to unite the fracture, and we should give the functional.
This is Dr. Shirish. I just joined in from Oman. Went through your lecture and I completely agree, because even in the last 3 or 4 months that I've observed here, all my arthroscopy cases have dried up. But the only cases which I'm getting right now are traumas. So it is very, very important that, a budding orthopedic surgeon should have a good orthopedic skill in trauma first, because that is the thing which is not going to die at all. Trauma cases will come to you, whether you are a specialist or not. You will get trauma cases, so you have to have a very good trauma hand. It was a really good lecture.
Okay, thank you, Shirish sir.
Sir, there is a question in the chat. They are asking for your opinion about AO trauma courses, the basic and the advanced courses.
Yeah, so regarding the AO trauma courses, they are certainly very good, and I think all residents should, if possible, complete them during the residency itself. The AO, I mean, it starts right from pre-basic, AO pre-basic, basic, and then advanced. So definitely, it is a must. It shows you basically there are hands-on courses that teach you how to pass a particular, I mean, how to apply a plate, distal femoral plate, holocartic span, distal radius plate, or all, I mean, DHS, how to do it ideally on a sawbone model. Absolutely mandatory. I mean, you should undertake whenever you get an opportunity, even if you have completed your residency and then later on initial 1 or 2 years, they'll be very helpful doing all the AO courses, pre-basic, basic, advanced, and stepwise.
Thank you, sir, for delivering that enlightening talk about the exciting field of trauma. It has certainly aroused our interest in pursuing the specialization in that course. I would like to thank Dr. Darshan Sonawane for giving this talk, and we will proceed towards our next lecture. Our next session is about the exciting field of spine surgery. We have with us eminent spine surgeon from Pune, Dr. Tushar Devre. Dr. Tushar Devre is a consultant orthopedic spine surgeon. He has completed numerous fellowships in the field of spine surgery, especially ones from Rush Hospital in Chicago, USA. He is also a fellow of deformative correction and minimally invasive spine surgeries. Completed his fellowship from the National University Hospital in Singapore. He is a fellow of the Department of Orthopedics and Spine at University Hospital of Wales, Cardiff, in the United Kingdom. He has also completed a clinical fellowship with Dr. Shekhar Bhojraj at the Spine Foundation, Mumbai. I request him to start his session and guide us on the field of spine surgery.
Very good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I must thank Department of Orthopedic Surgery, Mymar Medical College, Dr. Nagre Madam, Dr. Kamath sir for giving me this opportunity to join and try and share my experience regarding the field of spinal surgery and the opportunities in spinal surgery. So as Dr. Darshan has just few minutes back rightly said, whenever you pass out your graduation, you try to pursue for your post-graduation. And as he rightly said, orthopedic surgery is the cream of the society. So when you undergo orthopedic surgical training, you have to start thinking what you want to do in future post-orthopedics. It's important that everyone has to start thinking from second year of post-graduation, what is you want to become in your future life. And once you complete your basic training of orthopedics, it is very, very, very essential to do trauma first. You have to do it for a while, at least for a year, because that is the bread and butter in orthopedics. Whoever has done any great specialization or the stalwarts which we hear, Dr. Sancheti, Dr. Hardikar and everyone, they were the first orthopedic surgeons and then they specialized into various fields. Dr. Adekar was the first spine surgeon in Pune. So we have to learn from him that he first started doing trauma practice. So it is important and imperative for everyone to start doing the trauma first, start planning your future. You may be interested in spinal surgery, you may be interested in arthroscopy, arthroplasty, and any other branches. But first is to gain your knowledge and momentum about trauma surgery. That is what I will highly recommend, and definitely I have done the same path. So once you decide what you want to do, then you have to think which branch, which specialty you want to. That means for spine, if I have to speak up, why spine surgery? Why you want to become a spine surgeon? Because unlike other branches in orthopedics, spine is a totally different ballgame. You cannot say I have done spine fellowship and I will still do trauma, still do arthroscopy, and I'll do arthroplasty. That doesn't work, because spine itself is so vast specialty that it has its own sub specialties like minimally invasive, endoscopic, uh, our gold standard open spinal surgeries, deformity correction surgeries, so many other things which you can again add on in your arena of expertise. So before entering spinal surgery, you have to make one pledge to yourself that अगर मैं spine करेगा तो उसके आगे मेरे को और कुछ नहीं करना है. That is very, very, very important. So once you decide that you have decided नहीं अभी मेरे को spine surgery करने का है, like second year of post graduation for me in Sancheti, I decided I'll do spinal surgery, but that doesn't mean I entered immediately in 2007 in spine. I entered it in 2009 because I did my trauma. So it's important for you to understand the basics of orthopedics and then enter subspecialties. So talking about spine surgery, there are various spinal fellowship programs in India as well as abroad. As you have seen, I have been done other trainings also in terms of Indian as well as overseas training. But whenever you want to decide about any specialty training, be it trauma or be it arthroscopy or joint replacement, you have to have an Indian training done first, which is minimum from a year to 2 years, 3 years. So then only you should think of jumping to a overseas training in your subspecialty. So mandatory is to do a Indian training first, then go for overseas training, apply for various fellowship programs overseas while you are doing your Indian training. So that is very important, and it is at par important when you enter spine surgery training. It has to be done minimum of 2 years. Why I say this? Because as I enumerated, there are so many other things. Even when you enter a spine surgery fellowship program, to understand the MRI appropriately, you take 6 months. So those who try to do a 6 months, 3 months observer training, that doesn't make you a wise spine surgeon, I would say. You can still call yourself as a spine surgeon, but that's not the way. So whenever you have to enter a spinal surgery program or fellowship program, first is to understand in India what are the opportunities I have. So I'll enumerate the official opportunities. First is FNB, conducted by National Board of Examinations, the DNB board. This is an official fellowship program which has an entry and exit exams. So you have to undertake, like you have to take a DNB primary and final exam. Similarly, you have to undertake a FNB entrance test. Once you get through that, then it's a 2-year official course. And there are many FNB centers all over India, like Ganga Hospital in Coimbatore, or MIOT in Chennai, or Hinduja Hospital in Mumbai, Park Clinic in Kolkata, and also some centers in Delhi, like Indian Spinal Injury Centers. So there are which are affiliated with National Board for FNB fellowship spine surgery programs. There are other programs for joints and trauma also in FNB, but I'm just talking about spine. So once you are like doing this, you can definitely call yourself as a spine surgeon. And many a times in Indian scenario where you have to practice for your future life, it is more than sufficient, to be frank. Another options are our Association of Spine Surgeons of India fellowship program. We call it ASSI fellowship. Again, it is a 2 years fellowship program at various centers all over India with eminent spine surgeons. You can be like joining, studying and understanding them from them. So that is one more thing which will be another very good certified fellowship program. That also has an entrance and a exit examination with a proper viva, case presentation and theory also. Another option is various states have their health universities conducting the fellowship programs. In Maharashtra, we have MUHS conducting fellowship programs. As like I know Sancheti Hospital has a MUHS spine fellowship. So there are certain centers in Maharashtra which MUHS has affiliated to give 2 years, 1 or 2 years fellowship program. I'm not sure exactly about 1 or 2 years, but that is also a you get a degree kind of thing. So these are official courses. Another thing is going and joining individual surgeons in Mumbai or Pune or Delhi or Ahmedabad or Bangalore, anywhere all over the India. There are many eminent spine surgeons. As like I trained with Dr. Bhojraj. So I worked with him for 3 years for my fellowship training. So as like it, there are many other senior surgeons who have their own fellowship programs, though it is not a official way of degree certified fellowship program, that there is no body which certifies you, but I would say that is also more than sufficient, which gives you adequate training in spinal surgery and even hands-on training, because that also matters a lot. When you pass out from that fellowship program, you need to be doing basic laminectomy, discectomy, pedicle screw fixation, cervical spine fixations, basic spinal traumas. So all these things are very, very important, and that doesn't cover in 6 months or a year. You, whatever you have to think, if I'm saying this, it's very important that you need to really understand that it is mandatory to do at least couple of years of training to call yourself as a well-trained qualified spine surgeon. Also, there are overseas fellowship programs. So once you finish your Indian training, it's very important to know what are the official opportunities to get into a fellowship program overseas. There are various centers. I can enumerate few where I am trained. One is in UK, Cardiff Spine Center, in National University Hospital, Singapore. There are another centers in Singapore or Europe or US. So the commonest people try to do is like AO. AO had a spine division and they do conduct AO spine fellowship programs. There are certain criteria which are important, that you need to be having a minimum experience of 2 to 5 years in spinal surgery to join these programs. You cannot like apply and you get it. It doesn't happen like that. So there are various AO spine fellowships across the globe. Very good centers in Europe or US or Australia, which has a lot of exposure, and that is actually a proper certified program. Certain centers don't allow you to scrub, but even if you have done your Indian training by observation also, you can learn a lot. So that is why I said Indian training is mandatory, supra mandatory, that you do it. So there are various centers or qualifying examinations in US also. First, you have to clear the USMLE to enter a board certified program for spinal surgery training or fellowships. So that is very important to understand, that whenever you have to do all this, then it has to be channelized and definitely your Indian guides or mentors do help you to get into that advanced training programs overseas or abroad. So there are another various boards in Europe who has Indian and European spine surgeon associations or Indian and American spine surgeon association. They also offer certain fellowship programs, usually short term, 4 to 6 weeks kind of, but they are all observer fellowships. They are not official clinical fellowships wherein you can scrub and operate or perform the surgeries or do certain steps in the procedure. So all these things you need to finish in your Indian training. And another thing which is through various observer programs, which you can do anywhere in the world and India as well. So once you are like qualified yourself into a spinal surgery training, then you can think of a advanced spine training. There are newer advances in spinal surgery also, like minimally invasive spine surgery, minimally invasive fusions, pedicle screw insertions, percutaneous fixations, percutaneous minimally invasive discectomies, endoscopic spine surgery, which is definitely a very good field, emerging field, I would say, though it is individual choice whether to pursue or not. But these are the things which you can add on into armamentarium. More importantly, there are another fellowship programs which are very important. Are once you are a qualified spine surgeon, deformity correction in kyphosis, scoliosis, kyphoscoliosis, and there are very well renowned surgeons all over the globe who are willing to take you as an observer or clinical fellows. But again, it is important to clear certain exams, give some certifications, get their medical boards certify you, and then you can enter all this. So in a nutshell, it's very important that you have to first decide why you want to become a spine surgeon. Then you can start thinking of other options. And I'm not saying that only spine surgery is the best or elite class. That is not at all the case. There are other specialties which are like very good, maybe a bit lesser learning curve than spine surgery. You may have to devote less time for training, but again, anything less than 1 year has no meaning for any specialty to call yourself as a specialist orthopedic surgeon. So I again thank everyone for listening to me, and I'm welcome to have questions. Thank you.
Hi, Tushar.
Hi,
Swapnil here, Dr. Swapnil.
Yeah, hi.
That's very, very good encouraging words towards our aspiring PG students. Just wanted to ask you, do you have any feeling like neurosurgeons becoming spine surgeons and orthopedic surgeon becoming spine surgeon? How you differentiate between orthopedic surgeon becoming spine and neurosurgeon becoming spine? It's like patient's perspective towards spine surgeon is different because they never come to you as orthopedic surgeon as a spine surgeon.
True.
They go to neurosurgeon also and they go to orthopedic surgeon also.
Very much.
So just I want to highlight your thoughts.
See, basically, neurosurgical training in India, like 3 years of MCH neurosurgery, there is a vast exposure for neurosurgeons into spine surgery also. But the basic difference, I would say, is the knowledge and hang about the basic bone and handling of the bone tissues and the fixation techniques. Though I will not say it is the 100% correct, because I know many senior neurosurgeons who are very good in putting pedicle screws, doing cervical spines and all. So no offense, I admire many neurosurgeons who are like great doing spinal surgery. But as in current situation and during the current training programs, orthopedic surgeon has certain advantage in handling the bony structures and doing the spinal surgery. So that has an advantage, I would say, because we see all these types of things happening, and then when it has to be coming to a revision spine surgery, everyone lands up to a spine surgeon, which is usually a orthopedic spine surgeon. So, but I again say I can count on numerous senior neurosurgeons who are, or our colleagues who are practicing with us. They're very good in spine surgery as well. That thoda difference rehta hai, that you need to decide, and definitely not to get bogged off that you have a lot of competition. Nothing like that. It is whatever you have to achieve, and you have to work hard to achieve it. That's very simple. So there is no gross difference in anyone doing spine surgery, neuro or ortho. But I feel I have certain advantage in doing fixations or doing scoliosis corrections, which definitely very, very rare neurosurgeons do. There are certain American surgeons. I have been to Dr. Faisler, who is orthopedic as well as neurosurgeon in Chicago, Rush Hospital. And he used to do deformities upright, his department, neurosurgery. They used to do phenomenal deformity work. So it's nothing like that. But yes, we do have an advantage in spine surgery for sure. I hope I clarified your point.
Yeah, thanks, Tushar.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir, for the enlightening talk and explaining the nuances of spine surgery to us. It was really interesting. I would like to thank sir for giving this talk, and we'd like to move to our next session. Our speaker for today, Dr. Abhijit Agashe, could not be with us today due to some constraints. We have with us Dr. Sinu Kumar Bhaskaran from Columbia Asia Hospital. We thank him for accepting our invitation at such a short notice. Dr. Sinu Kumar Bhaskaran is a joint replacement surgeon practicing in Pune. He has finished his undergraduate training from Dhule and got his postgraduate specialization at Sancheti Institute, following which he worked at Sancheti Institute, Lokmanya Hospital, and even Dinanath Mangeshkar. He has completed an advanced fellowship in joint replacement from the prestigious Endo Clinic in Hamburg, Germany. I would like to call upon sir to deliver his talk for today and hand over the mic to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you so much for that kind introduction. And I'll just dive, because this was, Darpan had just given me a call today morning about this emergency kind of situation and Abhijit not being there. So I just tried to hurry it, just put up a small PowerPoint. So I'll just try and share that right now. So that's what Darpan gave me a call regarding, sort of a lecture. This is quite unlike the normal kind of talks that we do. This is for the up and coming students, the post PG students. So it makes it that much more important, to give the right kind of advice. Though I would be, this is a full-on disclosure that I'm not at all in a position to give a lot of advice, in the sense that we are not heavy volume, high volume practicing kind of surgeons. We are just doing our bit, and we're just going to share a little bit of what we experienced during the last 15-20 years. Because I'm sure most of us, Tushar and I think Shirish after me, all of us have been through the same kind of training methods that we came up with. So we'll just try and share what we experienced in this last 15-20 years. And of course, with the changing scenario, I mean, in current scenario, there might be differences as to how you guys should go ahead and take these points and apply it to your way of practicing. But hopefully some of these basic guidelines should help you with it. And Tushar has already shared, and even Darshan had previously shared a lot of information as basic information, like getting your trauma done before you go into any specialty. So to begin with, there's no doubt that post PG it's an absolute conundrum. It's we are always wondering what we need to do if you have not made up your mind. Usually most of the students we've seen by the end of second year or something, you tend to get drawn towards one particular consultant, or you're drawn towards one particular field, and you basically just sort of follow them and idol worship them, and then you want to do what they're doing, and that's how you usually pick up on fields. But it's not a very scientific kind of choice. Very rarely do we have those kind of very inspiring eureka moments that I saw this surgery on this particular day, this surgery, and I made my mind, I'm going to be a spine surgeon or a joint replacement. For me, it was almost like that. I was at Sancheti and I was working with this wonderful surgeon, Dr. Parasnes, was my teacher at that time. I spent 3 months with him, and I saw this scoliosis correction he did one day, and I realized I decided I wanted to be a spine surgeon. But then there's a lot of water that flows under the bridge after that. So you can make your choices if you stick to it, well and good. But you're very lucky. But over a period of time, then you tend to change. Like I said, it's usually a gradual fondness. It's not something that happens spur of the moment kind of thing. And huge role by the institute that you're going to be working in, and your mentor. More important than a teacher or a guide is what you're going to have is someone like a mentor who's not just going to teach you the basics of surgical skills, but also will tell you what you need to do in life. So these are the people that you tend to follow, and that's how you usually pick up on. So you should, this is the right moment when you finish your PG, look for people, inspiring people like that all around you. I think more than any books or any kind of institute can teach you, it is good teachers, good humans who can actually, guide you the right way. And I've been very fortunate to, have my share of teachers and mentors. So just sharing a bit of my journey, like it was just told in the intro that I did my PG at Sancheti, following which for surgical work I followed. Shirish is going to speak after me. Shirish was my senior, and he called me to Mumbai to the municipal hospitals to do surgical work. He was very clear about it. During my exam time itself, Shirish had told me that we have done our post graduations, we are getting a degree or a diploma, but the important thing is finally you're going to go out there and practice as a surgeon. So you should know how to do basic trauma surgery. And that's why at that time we had this trend at Sancheti where we used to go to Mumbai and work in this was around 2001 to 2004, I'm sorry, and we used to work in Mumbai in those municipal hospitals, and just to gain surgical experience. And it made a hell of a difference in the way we approached any kind of trauma that came in our way. Then following that, I did my DNB at Lokmanya Hospital under Dr. Narendra Vaidya. And then following that, I joined Dinanath Mangeshkar with Dr. Wakankar. I spent 5 years with him working as a lecturer. And in between, I also did a fellowship stint at Germany with under Dr. Clauser. This was purely for revision kind of knee surgeries. So when we started off, orthopedic surgery, the arthroplasty surgery in orthopedics was done by very few of them, what we can call as orthopedic royalty, very, very few of them. And I remember during my JR days, we are not even allowed to be near the theater when there was a joint replacement happening. So it was just lecturer and above, the people who dealt with these. At the most you are told is to get an X-ray or get a lab report, that's it. And well, as today, if you can see, it's a quite a basic procedure. Most of, I think, you guys passing out might have done 1 or 2 of knee replacements before you pass out in your final year. You might have got the chance to do knee replacement. So it is not a procedure of the so-called orthopedic royalty anymore. A knee replacement is a pretty basic procedure. Most of the people along with trauma can do a standard knee, I believe. So that's the most important thing, is to have that belief that it's not a surgery that is rocket science. It is something, a standard TKR is something that once you get the basic kind of knowledge, the basic instrumentation skills, is you can do it too. So that was the first, at least in our time, there was a huge kind of mental block that we had as to whether you are maybe qualified enough, or maybe you are intelligent enough, or you are skillful enough to do a knee replacement, because it was definitely considered as a kind of a high profile kind of surgery. So again, the role of mentors really important. So having somebody not just teaching us but making us believe. So I was very lucky to have teachers. I would like to mention Dr. Mahesh Kulkarni and Dr. Wakankar. They were told that it is something that you can do. And it's like I said, it is, just making you believe. So look for mentors who can give you that confidence, not just the knowledge. Just a few words. Again, this is not, I don't want to sound patronizing with my experience. It's just, because how you're going to approach in knee arthroplasty, not just hip, but in knee, because why you need to spend time and why you need to learn this, invest that time in this. It's not just, studying instrumentation techniques and, following it just like that and expecting results. because a knee surgery, a knee arthroplasty is more like what we call as a chess game rather than a cookbook. So how you differentiate the two is, like in chess, your first move is going to affect something what is going to happen 10 steps down the line. So similarly in a knee surgery, your incision, your first release is going to affect everything. So that's why you need to have that understanding. So you cannot expect that you cut 9 millimeter here, 9 millimeter on tibia and femur, and you can have a knee that is going to be aligned and balanced. It's not going to. So that's the cookbook way of doing things. You add 2 + 2 together and expect something to happen, which is going to be adequate. So it doesn't happen that way. You have to sort of customize for each patient, each step accordingly, and do it. So it's not just because I'm an arthroplasty surgeon, I'm telling that there is some science behind all this carpentry, but yeah, there is, you have to have that level. If you want to call yourself a specialist, you should not just be doing that, simple kind of 2 + 2 = 4 kind of surgeries. You should have enough knowledge and understanding as to how different patients would need different solutions. So how do you go about your training? So fellowship, I think Tushar just explained that in great detail, as to how you can approach. So most of the fellowships are same, but spine and Scopy had much more sort of structured fellowship programs as compared to arthroplasty up till now. So, but there are a few associations and university-based fellowship programs coming up. I heard even the FNB program is in place right now for arthroplasty, but majority of the fellowships are still hospital or surgeon-based. So what you need to do is find out hospitals that have high volume work, find out surgeons that have high volume work, and you just need to go there and stick to them for maybe, at least a year or two till you can get that basic idea as to how you can do a total knee or a total hip. So it all depends. So you need to do a bit of groundwork as to the amount of surgical work that you're going to get along with, because at the end of the day it is a surgical skill, and these are skills that needs to be acquired. I mean, no matter how much you read or you watch surgeries, you have to be doing them. So you have to figure a way out how you can get to do these surgeries or on your own. And if you are a good student, if you're sincere, you've stuck around to one place, I'm sure that your teachers will let you do a few, and that's how you're going to get your confidence. And what I did during my fellowship was, this was the late 2000, I think, the first decade of 2000, I think. So not many people were doing knee replacements in general outside, big institutes. So what I did was, along with my fellowship, is went and met other surgeons and told them to call me if there is a knee replacement, if there's an arthritic patient, and we can talk to them and, do a knee replacement. So it was like, I remember traveling to places like Aurangabad, Nagar, spending the night in a state transport bus, reaching there in the morning, checking the implants on my own, and then doing the surgery. Because you have to do that cutting. You have to spend that time and effort to do that, because obviously your most of the hospitals that you join are private institutes, and you cannot expect your training or your teaching surgeon to give you complete knee replacements right from the the first year or second year. I was fortunate to spend about 4 or 5 years at one place, so I did get surgical work at my institute as well. But then you have to do this. You have to figure out ways where you can do surgeries on your own as well. But with these structured programs coming up, especially in the FNB program coming up, I'm pretty sure that there is going to be much more exposure for the students during the learning phase itself. Otherwise, it is usually like doing a fellowship, either a national one or an international one, just to get that on your CV, and then follow it up by getting your patients by admitting them somewhere, and you spend another year or two to gain surgical knowledge as far as arthroplasty is concerned. So, but I hope over a period of time, I think these things would change with FNB coming into arthroplasty as well. International fellowships, again, there's a huge variance here. There are it depends on the countries. So US again has got extremely structured fellowships. but then it's a bit difficult in terms of getting the right kind of recommendations. You need to pass the MLD exams, which even after clearing it, then getting through those interviews and the right kind of center with the right fellowship that you want is a bit of a challenge. So, but if you do it, I think that's the best way to go about it in terms of international fellowships. And there are fellowships in Europe, countries like Germany, Italy, which would again, it's very varied. I mean, there are centers in which in Germany, the place that I work, there are centers, in Hamburg. It was purely just scrubbing up kind of fellowship. You're never allowed to touch or operate on a patient, but you could assist and help out in surgeries. And of course, it was a learning experience. But then there are certain centers just outside the main cities in Germany where I could go and work as an assistant surgeon, and where they would let you do surgeries as such. So it's very varied there. But you have to always find out ways of going abroad, because that again is sort of a kind of a stamp on your CV that you've got a fellowship from one of these centers. So when you apply for a post in any kind of a corporate setup, so later on, so these are the few things that you need to have along with your basic post-graduation training, is that experience of 2 or 3 years of having worked in a proper center that does joint replacements, and 6 months or a year fellowship having been done abroad. So these two things will really help you in getting those initial attachments. So what do you do in a fellowship? So this is just since I had spent time as a lecturer at Dinanath. So when I see fellows coming in and going out, I used to see these are usually post PG 1 year or 2 years, they would come in to learn. So I mean, you need to come. So I would see a lot of them coming in and going back. Some people haven't gained that kind of advantage after finishing their fellowships at the end of 6 months or 1 year. Whereas some would really be pretty quick, and you can. It's all on your relation with the boss and how you can get along and how much he wants to teach you. So how do you do that? Is I think what you need to do when you join in a fellowship, the first and foremost thing is to be a good assistant first. Forget that you want to get a fellowship, you want to learn TKR, you want to get the knife right away and start cutting and taking bone cuts. It doesn't work that way. You have to gain the confidence of your teacher, your boss. And how do you do that is to be a good assistant. You have to make him comfortable on table. So how you make sure all the x-rays are there, make sure all the blood tests are there. It's like typically, I mean, you have done your PG, so you know how to make your lecturers happy. So, but the same thing intraoperatively, you have to make sure that the first few 1 or 2 months, all you're doing is making your operating surgeon as comfortable as possible, assisting him the right way, closing the right way, following his principles of sterility, just being as rigid in your sterility protocols as he is. So these are things you should pick up and you should follow. And once you do that, then you get confident and you get comfortable being an assistant, and you're just standing there looking at the surgery. And when you're standing there looking at the surgery, I want you to start thinking like the operative surgeon again. You should not be now an assistant after 3 or 4 months, along with giving those instruments and assisting him. Like I said, the knee replacement is like a game of chess. Your first cut is going to affect something that's going to happen 10 steps down the line. So you will see those subtle differences that these bosses do over a period of time. Why did he go for the tibial cut right away? Why did he go for the posterior femur after doing the distal femur? So those are things that should start making you question yourself. Ask him if you want, when the cementing is going on, ask him why he did that. And then over a period of time, you can start thinking actually ahead of, when you see a situation like that, you'll know what he's going to do. So you need to keep training your mind continuously when you're assisting. It should not be a mechanical thing. You become good at assisting and you're just standing there holding the spikes. So you have to start thinking like the operative surgeon, and that is what is going to help you when you're standing alone in a theater without any help, without any senior nearby, and when you're doing a surgery. So this is what is going to come into help. And of course, during your fellowship, read. I mean, there's no other substitute to that. You have to keep reading. You have to be as, obsessive about this subject as possible. Like about arthroplasty, we read, minute things which are totally irrelevant. Like what is the polymer that goes into the poly, something like GUR 1050 or 1072. We just, how is the plasma diffusion, mechanism works, how you can coat a, gold knee, make a gold knee by using titanium. neobium. But these are things which is not going to really help you. But I want that kind of obsession to come in during that phase, and that's what is going to make that difference between you and the rest of them. If you want to be at the top of your game, you want to do cutting edge kind of practice, you have to be well read along with a good surgical skill. Of course, there's no doubt your hands have to be excellent, but then this knowledge is what is going to set you apart from the rest. And you have to have idols or worship the current kind of course, during our time we had the Ranawats and KHS sir, and we of course they were the big heroes during our time, even now. But then even you have to look at the current masters, and you have to continuous people like Jan Victor or John Bellamans. These are people who have revolutionized, completely changed the way of thinking how knees are done. So you have to follow these people regularly, and see what they are coming up with, new studies, new papers. And that's how you're going to again, be on top of your game. So, and very, very important, like you can't just spend 3 months or 6 months somewhere and call yourself a knee replacement surgeon. You might be able to do a knee at the end of it, but that would be your standard varus kind of knee, and banging in a PS knee and coming out. So I think most of these kids within the during their residency do it. So so if you want to call yourself an arthroplasty surgeon, I think you should spend adequate time, learn everything that is to do with arthroplasty. You should be able to do a partial knee, you should be able to do a revision knee, you should know about computer assisted knee, you should know how a robotic is done. And of course, within the knee itself, you should know when you should do a CR, a cruciate retaining, or a posterior stabilized, how to do a kinematic alignment or a mechanical alignment. So like again, I said, each patient is different. You have to go after different solutions. You can't just keep banging in a same kind of posterior stabilized knee for all your patients. You have to give, and that's what you would realize over a period of time in your practice, that you might have done a good job, but patient satisfaction as compared to trauma or any other surgery, knee replacement is a surgery that highly depends on patient satisfaction, and your X-ray and your intraoperative surgery has nothing to do with it. So how do you make sure that you've done the right procedure for the right patient is because you should be adept and aware of all these procedures, and you should be able to offer it and do it for your patients. That's when this takes about 4 or 5 years down the line of your practice. When you analyze all your individual work, you know where to correct yourselves. And that's how I realized that we need to offer patients any what is suitable for them, what is going to work best in that. And then you should know about, I do computer assisted surgeries for all my knees. A robotic, I've learned about it. Even though I do not have a robot, I went to a center where it is done and I learned about it, because there are a lot of people who can sit back and criticize and say, but before commenting on any technique, I think you should know about the technique and do it once or twice before you comment on it. So again, take home there is, don't be a one-trick pony. Just don't learn one particular technique in a knee replacement and call yourself an arthroplasty surgeon. You have to spend time. I mean, there are people, at least I think 3 to 4 years is what is needed before you, want to practice exclusive arthroplasty. And when you start practicing, of course, I mean, like in all the other, fields, I think you should start off with uncomplicated cases. I mean, this is easier said than done, because at the start of a practice, we tend to have complicated cases coming our way, but try and keep it. If it is complicated, then keep somebody standby, keep your mentor or a good friend along with you. At least call them up and tell them you're doing a similar case like this. Analyze yourself, analyze how your cases are doing the initial few months, initial 1 or 2 years, how the patients' outcomes of your patients are. You need to have a good relationship with, if you do not have your own hospital, you need to have a, relationship with the hospital management. They should know what this is a completely different topic. I think you guys are going to be talking about it tomorrow, about how you work in a corporate setup, but that is again very crucial on how you set up your practice, any practice, not just arthroplasty, any practice, because your interests have to align. Because corporates completely look at it in a different way. It's completely finance based for them, their outcomes, whereas for us it is patient based. So you have to sort of align that at some point. It's only then you can have that symbiotic kind of relationship and take it forward. And Yeah, I mean, there's no, I mean, you have to understand that you have to market yourself. You might be excellent in your skills, but currently the scenario is such that you need to go out and tell people that this is what you can do. For the first 4-5 years, you do it. And once people come to know that, you have successful outcomes in your surgical practice, you are going to get patients. There's no need to push that any further. And again, very important in your practice is try and, it's been told so many times, surround yourself with positive people. People who are going to give you the, not just right advice, but positive advice. Otherwise, a lot of people, when you go somewhere, you're planning to do something, start a practice, there are people who tell that there are already 5 people who are practicing here, there are 10 people who are practicing there. See, if you're good and if you have belief in the way you are going to do your work, I mean, it shouldn't stop you. I mean, you can go and set your practice anywhere. In fact, it works better when, there are, more of 5 or 6 people practicing in one place. So absolutely do not listen to any kind of negative advice and, make major life, take major life-changing decisions based on that. So just to sum up, practice, of course you have to be realistic. I think Darshan was mentioning that trauma is your bread and butter. You need to always, you cannot just completely give up on trauma, because it's very few of them, even within Pune you can see very few of them who can exclusively practice joint replacement. So and it's even not just Pune, most of the cities it's the same way. So you have to keep trauma as a standby, whether you are doing scopy, plasty. Tushar was very clear. Spine is a field that is much more complex. There is much more techniques there. So, but for plasty, I've seen it is a bit difficult for everybody to develop those kind of numbers that will, so you have to have a baseline trauma practice at the same time. And you have a normal OPD, and you cannot just send away any trauma patient that comes your way saying that, because in my practice, what I saw is over a period of time, my trauma patients later on gave me more of knee and hip patients. I mean, going back and telling that, they send their relatives or friends to me. And so I think it's a good idea to keep a mixture of, trauma and plasty, just to make sure, especially in this current scenario with this COVID thing happening. I think the plasty work definitely went down, but the trauma kept on going. So that's again very important, which you guys need to think about, rather than thinking in terms of practicing plasty exclusively. Or you could do something like, this is something that's done in UK, where they practice specialties like shoulder or knee, and combine both scopy and plastic. But then again, it's a bit of a complicated thing to do it here in our country. So just to summarize here, finally, I think arthroplasty, there is no doubt about it. Like, it's definitely a good option. Everybody should think about it. Important to invest time and effort. Don't think post your MSU, do a 6-month fellowship and then you can practice plasty for the rest of your life. It's not, of course, there's going to be learning with time, but make sure that you spend at least good 2 to 3 years in different centers. Master the skills at least in basic various knee replacements and a basic uncemented hip replacement before you go into your private practice. There is definite good returns once you do this investment of time, both financially as well as the job satisfaction is absolutely terrific. And the last point is, of course, keep time for academics. This is one big regret that I had because during my learning time, I didn't, though I had the scope at an institute like Dinanath with the kind of workload we had, but I didn't. But that is one thing, if you are going into a specialty field like plasty or scopy or spine, whatever, make sure that from day one you concentrate on keeping time aside for doing some amount of academics as well, because publishing your work is extremely, because everybody analyzes their own work. We also did that, but we never sort of put it down on paper and published it. So that is something that you guys should be doing. So with that, I would like to stop right here. And if there is any doubt or any question anybody wants to ask me, please you could go ahead right now.
I would like to thank sir for the lecture. Due to the limitation of time, we request all the participants to type their questions in the chat sir can take the questions there. I'd like to thank sir for summarizing the entire field of arthroplasty in such a small lecture and enlightening us for that bit. I'll thank sir for his lecture and move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Shirish Pathak, who will speak on the subject of sports medicine and arthroscopy. So he has graduated from BJ Medical College and completed his post-graduation in the prestigious Sancheti Institute of Orthopedics in Pune. He has completed various fellowships in sports medicine, especially the one from Coimbatore, India, and secondly from Italy. He has also been awarded the Krishnan Fellowship by Indian Arthroscopy Society in the year 2004 to 2005. I request sir to take over and deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I would thank Mimar Medical College and the organizing team for this workshop conference, or I would say sort of a completely different concept about how to enhance and horizons for different specialty. So I would start with my lecture. See, as Sinu rightly said, a disclaimer in the beginning that I'm not in position to give you real advice. Probably I'm also sailing in the same boat, just 15 years ahead of you. And as you know, at every point of your career, you have challenges and you have to find ways to deal with them. So probably I can share a few concepts, thought processes, which I have practiced in the last 15 years, and they could be useful for PGs who are trying to get into different subspecialty fields. So I will restrict my talk about practice of sports medicine. So I think we have already gone through my CV, where I work and what I do. We do certain educational activities also, mainly Pune Shoulder Course and RCS London accredited arthroscopy skill training program in shoulder and knee. Before I start my talk, I'll be grateful to my all gurus, especially Dr. David Rajan from Coimbatore, where I did my first fellowship in shoulder and knee arthroscopy. My postgraduate opportunity to post subspecialties, which made a great clarity in the thought process for the post PG subspecialty selection. Navalaya Medical College did my career as orthopedic surgeon and arthroscopist, lecturer, and actually advanced it. Doing my friends and colleagues who taught me, who supported me during my journey towards becoming a subspecialty surgeon. So what is sports medicine? It is very important to get a clear, rather a clarity about this broad subspecialty of medicine. So it is a very broad subspecialty. You have two aspects. One is sports injury prevention and treatment, and second is, so as we were discussing, orthopedic sports medicine has got so much scope that you deal with early diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of primarily sports injuries. Most of them you try to treat them conservatively. You do arthroscopic surgeries of joints. At the same time, you have to have a good knowledge about allied disciplines of sports medicine. That helps you to build a good patient base so that they start believing in you. And you have a very important key role in decision making in injured athlete's career. Now I'm going to mention few commandments. I would call them 10 commandments for career building, which I have practiced myself and still try to follow the same. The first commandment is to become a good orthopedic surgeon. See, unless you are good in general orthopedic surgery, it is futile to pursue subspecialty. So those who are pursuing their PGs right now, I would advise them, don't try to think of subspecialty right now. You have to become a good orthopedic surgeon. You should be confident to do each and every basic orthopedic surgery correctly and with the right technique. Then you qualify to pursue a subspecialty. Second, do not choose subspecialty because it is paying more. Third, choose one which you like and you are good at. You will excel in your career only if you can enjoy doing it whole life. If you are following something just because it pays more, after a few years, you will get bored of that specialty. So stay focused and strive for better every day. There is always space at the top. You have to stay focused and keep doing more and more practice to get there. Be academically updated about your specialty in particular. Try to become a good teacher and a good student always. Share knowledge and skills wherever possible. And last, Hippocratic oath, do no harm. Offer best to your patient. As rightly said by Michelle Obama, success isn't about how much money you make, it's about the difference you make in people's lives. And you can make this difference if you like what you're doing. So now, what are scope and challenges for pursuing arthroscopy and sports medicine? I think world is moving towards minimal invasive surgeries. In last couple of decades, there is exponential increase in sports participation and number of sports injuries. And definitely there is overall awareness about sports medicine as a subspecialty and as a super specialty. So when you pursue sports surgery, you are mainly dealing with ACL reconstruction, meniscal surgeries, arthroscopic shoulder surgeries, cartilage surgeries, PRP injections, and you deal with a lot of overuse injuries in athletes. The challenge is, while you pursue subspecialty in sports medicine, most important is steep learning curve. I think this applies to most of the subspecialties, more so for arthroscopy. You have to spend at least 3 to 4 years to achieve a good surgical and diagnostic skills. And unfortunately, there are very less training opportunities. So what are the training opportunities available right now? So I think FNB sports medicine is available in 5 centers across India, but I think very much limited number of seats. I guess about 6 to 8 seats are there. And you have to appear for a common entrance exam conducted by National Board of Examinations. Then there are a lot of inland national level fellowship programs. Indian Arthroscopy Society is very much active. And on the website, you can always get more information about IS accredited centers and the faculty who is conducting those sort of training programs. Then there are few MUHS accredited fellowships in arthroscopy. There are some individual institute fellowships where you can apply on personal basis and follow 6 months or 1 year fellowship. And of course, once you complete at least 1 year of inland fellowship at national level, you can try to pursue international fellowship. Now, international organization like ISACOS or Arthroscopy Association of North America or even European Sports and Knee Society is very active and offering international fellowship, especially to Asian countries with some sort of stipend. Now, place of practice. I think I would suggest strongly if you are working in tier 1 cities, then exclusive subspecialty practice would be advisable. But as rightly mentioned, if you are in tier 2 cities, then probably general orthopedic plus subspecialty practice can, you would get advantages of both. Now, time for settlement. So it varies, it all depends. So these are 4 A's which were told by my teacher, Dr. Sandeep Patwardhan. This would apply to all subspecialties. If you're available, if you're affordable, if you're affable and adjustable, then probably there is no dearth of work for you. And you have to have surgical skills, which will give good results, and also communication skills, which will get you more work. Investment, yes. for arthroscopy, it is going to be a bit costly. You have to invest at least 10 to 15 lakhs initially, because you need a good quality new brand imported equipments like arthroscope, shaver, camera, lens, hand instruments. I would suggest not to go for substandard equipment because they will affect your surgical skills and overall results. It is good idea to train your assistant or staff member who would be, helpful during your surgeries and will work as a multi-purpose worker for you. So it is best to make a team. To conclude, whatever specialty you pursue or develop, do not forget you are an orthopedic surgeon. And most importantly, treat the patient, not MRI, not X-ray. Thank you. And I wish best of luck to all PGs. And I'm sure you will make the right choices at right point of your lifetime. Thank you.
There was a question from Dr. Akash Sharma. Is there any specific advice for the diploma pass outs? Any different avenues or any different options, or are there any limitations for diploma pass outs?
So basically, yes, definitely there are certain limitations in terms of joining any official fellowship programs. Diploma orthopedics is not the valid degree. So we need at least DNB or MS to be done to join any official fellowship program in terms of certified programs, as I mentioned, for any specialty. But if you join a mentor and you convince him that I want to pursue this career and simultaneously learn the skills, it is possible. So, but that will be a uncertified program, training program. I won't call it a fellowship program, because fellowship is like undertaking, doing things and start operating yourself during the training program and come out as a full-fledged established specialty surgeon. So that one thing I think you need to understand and try to pursue DNB before entering any further fellowship or specialty training. This is what I feel. So now Dr. Sinu is there live. Anyone having any questions regarding joint replacement, arthroplasty training, options available, avenues available, please ask him. He is there with us to answer all our questions.
Sir, I have a question for Dr. Sinu, sir. While practicing arthroplasty, so is it advisable to join the bigger institutes or corporate hospitals, or like in a permanent position, or we can continue as a freelancing as consultants towards multiple hospitals?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal scenario is to get a corporate kind of tie-up, because the way, like still this is a surgery that is practiced in sort of, specialty hospitals. So it's a corporate kind of backup there. So if that is the ideal scenario, if you can get the backing of a corporate setup and you can sort of practice there and, do a bit of private on your side as well. But it doesn't work out the same all the time like that. So the second best is to work in a medical college kind of place where, you get enough work at the same time, though financially it does take some time, and but it does give you enough work and you can do a freelancing. Freelancing is a bit difficult in today's practice of arthroplasty, because most of them are doing it. Unlike arthroscopy, where there's still an option of freelancing. So I would give my first choice is to look for a corporate setup and then a medical college. And if nothing works out, then yeah, you could keep freelancing as an option. But yeah, again, because most of the corporate, you'll have to take your private hospital, private clinic patients to an hospital, and these hospitals already they have their own arthroplasty surgeon. So so that's
now we have Shirish again back to us.
Yeah.
So over to Shirish. Please continue, Shirish.
If there are any questions for Dr. Shirish, typed in, and brings us to the end of the soup and starters for a 4-course meal. And what are the take-home messages for today? First and foremost, you need to be a good trauma and orthopedic surgeon before you decide on a subspecialty. And the next thing is that you do whatever you like, but you need a good institutional attachment, preferably in a medical college, which will sustain you also. Now, I hand over the mic to our principal, Colonel Dr. Rajendra Prasad Gupta, to give the vote of thanks for today.
Good afternoon. The orthopedic surgery has always been a demanding specialty. I remember I did my house job in orthopedics 45 years back. We hardly got any time for lunch, 15 minutes, and for dinner. But nowadays, not only orthopedic surgery is demanding, but the scope of orthopedic surgery is also highly advanced. And a student after passing MS orthopedics has to find a particular field or specialization. The Department of Orthopedics of our college has organized 4 days CME to guide the budding orthopedic surgeons. In today's session, Dr. Darshan Sonawne from Bharati Vidyapeeth has rightly pointed out that trauma cases are going to increase day by day and scope in this field is high. As survival age is increasing, the scope of knee or hip arthroplasty is going to increase more and more, as told by Dr. Sinu Kumar Bhaskaran for Columbia Hospital in Kharadi. Dr. Tushar Devra is a very reputed spine surgeon from Jupiter Hospital, Baner, and I had the opportunity to refer one patient to him also, and he nicely treated the patient. So he has told the scope of spine surgery. Dr. Sirish Pathak is a leading shoulder surgeon of Maharashtra. I attended his lecture here earlier, delivered by him in this Mymar Medical College, as well as I got the opportunity to show my wife to Dr. Sirish Pathak, and I thankful to nice opinion and guidance. So he has rightly pointed out scope of sports medicine is increasing day by day. So I had opportunity to interact with them. So I'm thankful to all the 4 speakers in this session for sparing your valuable time and enriching knowledge of our young postgraduate students. Thank you so much.